Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest edition of ReTFOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Cleansing Arc, written by RegalLegalEagle. Theodore let out a slow breath as he felt the landing rockets shudder around him. He tried to steady his hands, but for some reason, he just couldn't right now. He could feel the quiver within them. Excess epinephrine or frayed nerve endings. Focus. He needed to focus. This wasn't his first battle, not even his first drop, but he'd never had such a dream before. Did he tell anyone? He cast a weary glance to his side at some of the other men in the rocket. "Do you read the Comrade General's letter?" Thurston was asking Jones, his usual partner in mischief. "We embark on a great crusade. Soon our mighty nation shall stretch from Borealis Bay to the Cliffs of Fire. Yes, I read it. He sure can write with fancy letter. But let us hope, comrade, that this battle plans are half so well devised." Jones shook his head a moment and checked the sights on his M9 for the dozenth time. Theodore looked away from them once more. He'd better keep his dream to himself. Considering the importance of the bird, either everyone had similar dreams and it would be pretentious of him to think it was unique, or no one had such dreams and they might think him nigh heretical to even suggest that he could be visited in such a way. Maybe he should see the comrade chaplain about potential battle fatigue. No, that might jeopardize his position. He knew that he had to be stronger than the others, for he was not just a soldier. He was part of the elite that brought the true power of America to their foe, one of their rubber souls. He had proven himself time and again in battle, and this would be no different. Even so, he gulped a little hard and forced himself to take a slow, deep breath once more while focusing on the star and streamers blast on the wall before him. The light of the morning star would see him through. Reason would guide him through, for he carried the torch of enlightenment to the huddled masses beyond their borders, and he would see them cleansed of ignorance and impurity alike, one way or another. Comrade Teddy, he jerked a little as he felt someone slap the back of his armor. He looked around a moment to see who had sought his attention. It was Comrade Code Talker Rain. "Yes, comrade?" he asked, trying to keep his usual deep, confident tone and not let the waver of uncertainty bleed through. "Did the reports speak of there being any interference in the atmosphere today? My instruments are behaving oddly. I wanted to know if you had the barometrics at your disposal, comrade," Rain asked as she gave him a slightly nervous look. He could tell that she was trying not to shake herself. Battle fatigue. That's all it was. He knew they must all be going through it to some extent. He was no different. "Yes, here you are, Comrade Coat Talker." He reached into one of his pockets in his harness. It was a little hard to grip through his heavy gloves, but he pulled out the teal paper with the day's barometrics to hand to the code walker. He wasn't sure why the instrument operators weren't all given the metrics daily, but he didn't mind sharing. His suit was perfectly calibrated as always. Even his nerves couldn't detract from that. "Thank you, Comrade Teddy." Rain nodded as she took the list to help adjust her gear. "Retrograde in 30 seconds, the pilot yelled out. He could see the motors of the ball turrets on the hull start to turn and move. Their landing would be contested. "You see the news about the Cavens last night?" Comrade Jones was asking. "Their supposed victory in Volgograd. Time will tell if they're even possibly accurate. But if they're to be believed, they are pushing the Martians back to the Caucasus, though fighting ahead for them is regardless." Thurston was chewing on gobs of gum as he spoke. He liked to cut it close to the timer before spitting. "I still can't believe we allied ourselves with those mongrels, populists," Jones spat out his own gun, as he said that to emphasize his point. "It's just a matter of convenience. Same with the Austrians. Once the Americans are united and pure, you can expect a good cleansing of the old world, comrade." Thurston grinned. "Isn't that right, Comrade Teddy?" he called out then. "The cleansing arc knows no limits," Teddy responded, which made them chuckle even as the others in the hole shifted around and checked their weapons as the rocket plummeted through the sky. "Solstice in Rio, right, boys?" Thurston called out, and had a few cheers from the men. 20 seconds, the pilot called out. And then the cheering stopped as the turrets on the hull began to fire. "Flak!" At that, Thurston pulled a large gob of gum from his mouth and slapped it into his olive drab helmet. He teased the rookies that he always wanted to save it for later. Theodore closed his eyes, even as he heard flak ping off the hull. There was a scream as some got through, the men rattling around, trapped inside a steel box as they waited to be delivered to their target. They were in the hands of the great ones now: Franklin, Jefferson, Colt, Leavitt, Whitney, Carver, Darwin, exemplary Americans all. But for obvious reasons, he thought most of all about Tesla. It was his design that had saved them in the first invasion. Even those early Tesla cannons had been enough to stave off their enemies, and now improved design stretched from coast to coast, Anchorage to Hudson, Borealis to Panama. It was strange to think how far they'd come in such a short time. Even since their start of the Third War, they'd advanced far. Hard to believe that they were halfway through 1958 already. But war was the great driver of innovation, and as it stretched into its fourth year, he knew they still had far to go. 10 seconds, the pilot yelled, barely audible over the sound of the turrets and flak. Several of the men around him were hit as shrapnel pierced the hull. They screamed as they fell, but Theodore didn't have time to waste on small concern. "Landing!" Theodore felt the hard jolt of the craft around them as the thrusters slammed into action. A moment later, another hard jarring, and a men inside stumbled as the rocket tilted to the side a bit. But then the hatches blew off, and they were exposed. The sky was bright over Cartagena, even as they bellowed out a war cry and charged. The naval landing would be going on now as well. It was their job to link up with them throughout the day, but their foes would not make it easy. "Bennies!" he heard the cry, just as the trace of fire began to sweep across them. To his left and right were dozens of rockets impaled into the earth as they discharged their cargo. There wouldn't be any stopping this tide of humanity as they broke upon the defenses around the city. It was only a question of how much blood would be spilled in the process. "Get to the teeth," he heard the comrade captain call out as his men rushed forward towards the cement tank traps before the line of bunkers that cut them off from the city. Theodore just ran forward, ignoring the cries and screams around him. Some of the soldiers tried to return fire, but the withering hail of machine gun fire swept across the ranks. Behind him, one of the rockets exploded as artillery fire began to rain down on them as well. The cost would be high, but they would not fail. On he ran, falling behind many of the others due to his heavy suit, but he was able to shrug off the few rounds fired his way. They didn't think to focus on him. Their mistake. He finally made it into the base of one of the dragon's teeth, and gasped to catch his breath. "Are you okay, Comrade Teddy?" He looked over to see the captain staring at him, and nodded quickly. "Covering fire," the captain called out, and around him the soldiers leaned out from cover to begin firing on the nearest bunker. Many of them were cut down even then, their cries and screams reaching up to join the cacophony of battle that was deafening all around him. But Theodore rounded his cover and ran at the bunker. He could see the muzzle flashes of the machine gun. It was almost a continuous flame as it spat death across the field. Traces splashed over and around him, but let them have their chemical reactions and their lead. He was human. He was a good conductor. He was a rubber soul. He answered to a higher power and a higher voltage, for he had the very power of the gods themselves at his fingertips. He wasn't a mere soldier. He was a Tesla trooper. His hand reached out, and he couldn't help but scream as he unleashed his first bolt of the day. The white-blue electricity arced out from his hand, streaming into the open firing slit to the bunker. He could hear the squealing and screaming from inside as bullets began to cook off in their casings, and his foes found themselves full of impurities and poor conductors. A charred body flopped out from the firing slit then, steaming as it cooked. The long-limbed Venusian, barely distinguishable, as its 4 eyes had become vacant, steaming holes in its already twisted and ugly face. Behind him, many of the soldiers cheered, but Theodore just pushed on, rushing around the side of the bunker that he could see more in the trenches. The green aliens lined up in their khaki grey uniforms as they tried to stem the tide of humanity crashing against them. On the edge, they saw Theodore and screeched in warning to those around it. But it was far too late, as he was almost upon them.
"You wanted our free wireless power? Then take it,"
he bellowed, even as he reached out and let lightning shoot forth once more. The aliens screamed as their bodies twitched and danced as if they were nothing more than puppets, and he, their puppeteer, pulling their strings. They steamed and charred as lightning ran through them, cooking flesh and ammo alike. Further up the trench, more aliens broke, turning to jump out the back and run for the city. There were more cheers as he dropped into the trench to follow, but stopped as he saw a figure before him. It was another human, but he wore a khaki of the collaborator soldier. The damn Iberians had folded the first sign of divine beings from the heavens. They'd always been weakened by their religious temperament. The man was trying to reload his rifle, but obviously panicked and terrified as Theodore approached him. So he finally threw his rifle down and raised his hands. "No clemencia, por favor," he begged.
"May the cleansing arc burn away your impurities,"
Theodore replied as he lifted his hand. The man cried out and tried to turn, but the lightning was far faster as it bathed him in a pure white glow. The collaborator screamed as he too was cooked until Theodore closed his hands to break the arc. The man fell dead just as Theodore's comrades began to jump into the trench around him. "Good work, Comrade Teddy. Come on, men, we push for the city. Comrade Teddy, take our Comrade Codewalker towards that hill. We need to update command." The captain pointed to a nearby hill just in front of the first line of bunkers. He could see a machine gun nest upon it, but that would be quickly destroyed.
"Yes, Comrade Captain,"
Theodore responded, and he raised his pointer and pinky fingers in salute. Then he had to haul himself up out of the back of the trench, rolling onto the dirt as he scrambled to his feet, and began to run towards the hill. All along the lines he could see men breaking through as more Tesla troopers like himself purified the bunkers in pure electricity. His heavy metal armor made it difficult to rush the hill, but it meant that the Vinnies firing upon him could do little but watch in horror as their rounds bounced off of him. The aliens in the nest atop the hill grabbed their gun and turned to flee as he approached, but it was far too late for them as he reached out to make them dance and fry. As they dropped dead and crested the hill and looked out across the trench work between them and the city proper. In the far distance, he could hear the naval guns firing upon the city and knew the invasion was progressing. "Titan!" he heard the warning too late as the ground around him erupted. Theodore was tossed into the remains of the machine gun nest among the bodies of the crew he'd just killed. His ears were ringing hard as his suit had acted much like a giant bell as it took the brunt of the explosion. He groaned out in pain and could taste iron and ions on his tongue. His right leg was wet, and he couldn't sit up. His helmet was too heavy. With a painfully slow hand, he moved up to unlatch his helmet, only to notice his right armor was bare. His gauntlet was gone, and the armored arm had been sheared off from the blast. If it weren't for the padding, his organs would have been liquefied in the explosion. Theodore slowly rolled to side, like a turtle stuck in its back as he tried to get up. Finally, he managed to slowly turn himself over and prop himself up on the hands and knees. There was a snap as his helmet simply fell off, leaving him in a metal chest piece held together by metal scraps. The ground around him began to shake and rumble, and he looked down the hill towards the city once more. A titan in khaki grey armor was lumbering up the hill towards him. They were giants, over 10 feet tall or maybe a dozen, and they carried cannons fit for a tank, if not a battleship. Theodore felt blood dripping from his nose and lips as he watched it slowly ascend the hill towards him. It was smart, as it fired upon the other Tesla troops across the field. This titan knew that its black carapace and heavy armor would render it almost invulnerable to small arms, and they hadn't expected titans, so they didn't bring many stovepipes. None of the other Tesla troopers would be able to get close to it before being killed by that cannon he carried. It was up to Theodore. He had to kill it. But how? His gauntlet was gone. His suit was ruined. How could he do it? It was a flutter, then, and he looked to his right. A bird had landed. Its eyes closed. His dream. This was it. It was real. It had spoken to him. He slowly began to crawl towards the bird, even as the Titan stomped closer. The bird sat still, waiting for him, perched on his ruined power coil. Theodore's ears slowly began to stop ringing as the sounds of battle became clear yet again. His crawling was slow, and he had almost made it. His fingers reached out for the bird. If he could only... Ah! He cried out, as a heavy foot pinned him to the dirt as the Titan stepped on him.
You will die today, human. You will die knowing failure.
The deep voice of the Titan mocked him.
The worlds and the moons are united against you. This planet cannot stand.
He heard the sharp crack of lava lance then. So they were Mercurials, too. How had intelligence missed all of this? The Vinnies and the collaborators in the front line were what? Decoys, bait to lure them in. But Theodore ignored the Titan and kept reaching for the bird. His fingers were so close, it was looking right at him. Eyes still mercifully closed. His fingers just barely brushed the softest of feathers he'd ever touched. He thought of home. He thought of the farm. He thought of his parents, his brothers, his sisters, his comrades. And he thought of the tri-fold flag.
Cleanse me!
He screamed out then, desperately trying to grab the bird.
What is this? A bird, idiot human?
The Titan growled as his foot came up, no doubt to fully stomp and crush Theodore's head. But without the force to pin him to the ground, Theodore could reach, his hand closing around the bird.
I give myself in death to save my comrades. I am a rubber soul. Cleanse me!
He screamed with the little air he could left in his lungs. And the bird opened its eyes. He cried as he saw the pure white light pouring out of its eyes, and was bathed then in the most intense and pure lightning he had ever experienced. There was screaming all around him, some of his own, some the Titan, some he didn't know, and his entire world went white. He was at peace. The pigeon had spoken to him. He was a pure conductor. He was clean. Now he could rest. Comrade Teddy, everything hurt. He whimpered and cried. He couldn't rest. Comrade Teddy. His eyes slowly fluttered open. The pigeon looked at him a moment, its eyes a piercing blue. Comrade Teddy, it was speaking to him.
Yes,
he gasped out. Lips cracked and broken, blood dripping from his mouth, nose, and ears. What more did the bird ask of him? Comrade Teddy! He felt a hand grab his shoulder, and he let go of the bird in surprise. It simply flew off into the sky as Comrade Rain rolled him over. He could see her worried expression.
Comrade, code talker,
he muttered. His throat was dry, so dry.
What? The bird.
You ignited your entire power pack. Can't believe you're alive, she exclaimed in surprise. He tried to shake his head as he looked around a little. The Titan lay dead beside him, cooked inside its own armor. His power pack had gone critical when the pigeon had unleashed its infinite power. Must have, He tried to tell her, but he couldn't. His lungs burned. His throat was on fire. Don't talk. She propped his head up a little, and he felt the cold canteen pressed to his lips. He nearly threw up at the feeling of cold water being poured into his mouth, but thankfully he only spluttered a little and managed to get some of it down. Be still, Comrade Teddy. I'm a school command now. But be still. We might salvage this thanks to you, she told him, and set the canteen beside his head. Turning away from him, he saw her grab her handset as she began to speak in her native tongue. Theodore tried his best to prop himself up a little and looked down the hill. There were the Mercurials out across the field, mixed in with the Venusians and the collaborators. Their white-hot flesh hard to miss as they fired their lava lancers, but they were slowly getting pushed back by the advancing Tesla troopers. Their control of fire meant nothing in the face of Tesla's mastery of lightning. He didn't see any other titans. He lay his hand back down then and simply looked up at the clear, blue early morning sky. The Third World's War raged on around him. But for now, his fight was done. He was a good conductor. He was a rubber soul. He was cleansed by the Ark. And as he watched a lone pigeon fly past, he knew he was pure. Now he could rest. End of story. I would just like to thank the T5 supporters: Bushmaster 117, Casper Arnholtz, Draxoon WRE, Elijah Silvercross, Gray, John Carrington, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.